Hello, freedom lovers, crime fighters, and enemies of the state. This is William Moore with Beyond the Ties That Bind. Today, what I want to talk about a little bit is something covered yesterday, but going to make that as brief as possible. And then we're going to talk about that season that's approaching. It's hard to believe that it's already been 4 years. It seems like yesterday that we had to put up with all of the politicking, the campaigning, the lies. Remember, Hillary would be in jail, Obamacare would be repealed, and that the troops would be home, and that taxes would be lower. Remember those four big ones? Um, I don't know about you, but I've talked to a lot of people whose tax bills have increased in the last couple of years. So, anyway, um, no politician ever follows through on his promises. Um, Yesterday, we talked about the Wuhan flu or the coronavirus, an outbreak of 600 people out of 1.4 billion in China. I know I said over 2 billion, but over 1.4 billion Chinese individuals and one American out of 330 million. So far, 17 people in China have died from the coronavirus, and um, there are no fatalities in America thus far. However, in 2018, influenza claimed the life of approximately 80,000 people here in America. So, and that's if we can trust the government's numbers, but approximately 80,000 people died of influenza, but not one yet of the coronavirus in the news media. They're really starting to pump this story. So anyway, then over 3,500 individuals have died because of using a cell phone while driving. So stupidity has claimed more lives this year than the coronavirus has claimed worldwide. Um, you know, the only ones who are going to benefit from this, of course, pharmaceutical companies, because we see an uptick in the pushing of vaccinations now. The influenza vaccination, maybe it can stop this coronavirus, which 600 people now are infected with. Um, Anyway, China has put cities under quarantine due to the coronavirus. Even though the government officials carry on as if there's nothing to be alarmed about at all. So Hong Kong, which has had protests taking place for months, is now under quarantine. So my question is, could the Chinese government be using the coronavirus to be suppressing protest as the Chinese New Year approaches? I don't put anything past any government. I mean, come on, 600 people? Um, that is so below even a quarter of a percent of the population. It's not even a tenth of a percent of the population. It's not even 1/100th of a percent of the population. And all of a sudden they're putting a quarantine on a city like Hong Kong. Why? So, I mean, we look back the last few months, they've been looking for ways to suppress these protests, and maybe they found a way to do so. Um, as far as the coronavirus, it's pharmaceutical companies and the government they stand to profit from this. The government can, you know, issue a law for people to be inoculated. So, of course, they are in the pocket of big pharma. So big pharma can actually have their friends in Congress, um, pass a law. Everyone has to be inoculated for the coronavirus, for national security, because we've got one guy up in Washington right now, the state of Washington, who has this, and he hasn't died, but 17 people in China have. Like I said, you go to faux news, you go to CNN, scroll down a little bit. It used to be way down the page, but you scroll down a little bit now, and the coronavirus is working its way up in the news cycle. So it's something to watch for. But as far as healthcare is concerned, we talked about it yesterday. People thinking that they have a right to demand others use their resources to take care of them, whether that resource be time, money, whatever. But healthcare, if you eliminate government, you eliminate the playing field where a prosperous society would allow for everyone to share in the opportunity to accumulate wealth. So there's the problem. You people that want healthcare, or if you know someone who wants healthcare, they have to understand that we have to eliminate the government in order to make sure that everyone um, can share in that slice of the pie known as wealth. Because with a true free market opposed to the fascist brand of capitalism we now live under, gives everyone the chance to have everything they need and desire. So eliminate government, and you eliminate the obstacles for people to acquire wealth. You eliminate the obstacles that are there right now that stand in the way of people acquiring wealth. And people need to quit using government to shake down others on their behalf. I mean, everybody wants to use the government to shake down somebody else so that they can get something for themselves. And, you know, they use the government to shake down people just so they can acquire what they think they deserve at the expense of others. And even if people get some of what they want by using government to forcefully rob others, um, what they what they eventually will receive from government will only be crumbs compared to the real slice of the pie that a truly free society provides. You're only going to get crumbs from the government. The government will only give people just enough to survive and keep them dependent upon government. Government's never going to give people the resources or opportunity to be free, to truly be free. They're only going to provide enough so that you have to continually keep coming back to them and keep you dependent upon them. You're never going to break the cycle as long as government exists. But if we eliminate government, then we can have a truly peaceful, prosperous society where everyone can share in the wealth. You level the playing field for everyone. So anyway, enough on the healthcare thing. Right now, I want to talk about the election. That time approaches where you have the left pitted against the right pitted against the left, the Christians trying to shove their morality down the other side's throat, and the other side, the left, trying to shove their right to murder children in the womb down the other side's throat. But both sides have something in common. They both will feed the military industrial complex. So anyway, many of us are going to hear, well, if you're not for Trump, you must be for Sanders, Warren, or Clinton. And then, or if you're not for the Democratic candidate, you must be for Trump. The fact of the matter is, just because you're against one form of slavery doesn't mean that you have to be for a different form of slavery. It's like there can be two stupid ideas concerning one issue. Just because you're against one stupid idea doesn't mean that you have to be for the other stupid idea. And I did mention Clinton, and I'm going to say this right now, and it's not a prediction. I'm out of that. I will no longer make predictions because you never know what the powers that be are up to. I didn't expect Trump to win. I expected Hillary to be in there, but as stated, the puppet masters, they wanted Trump as their puppet, and I can see why now. But anyway, I did mention Clinton, and that's because if there is a brokered convention, I guarantee the Hillary beast is going to be waiting in the wings. and she is going to take the nomination if there's a brokered convention. This saves her the trouble of having to campaign during the primary process. She'll have very little campaigning to do. Anyway, it's a thought. I mean, it may or may not happen. They may give it to Bernie Sanders because the Democratic Party just wants to crash and burn in the next election, or Elizabeth Warren because they just want to crash and burn because the deal's already been made to have Trump in there. However, if they don't want Trump back in, you watch. Hillary will come out of the wings at the Democratic National Convention, and she will have the nomination. Um, but in the end, really, it doesn't matter. No matter who's elected, the banking agenda continues to be implemented, and lives continue to be sacrificed at the altar of the military-industrial complex. Um, so your vote doesn't count. Your vote doesn't count at all. Um, you can't use the ballot. One thing, if you believe in freedom, first of all, there's no way that you can use the ballot like a bullet. You can't use it to make others conform to your will. That's immoral. Voting is immoral. I don't care how you try and dress it up, it's immoral. Another thing, for those of you who believe in scripture, you cannot serve Elohim and Mammon. And Mammon in that context, I've been doing a lot of uh, study on this, and it looks like Mammon in that context could very well mean government. So you can't serve two masters. You can't have two governing bodies over you. You're either part of the kingdom that scripture speaks of, or you're part of the kingdom of government. So, one thing that apparently the corporate Christian structure has not learned in the past thousand upon thousand years, 2,000 years here, is that you cannot legislate morality, because morality comes from the heart. Morality is a heart issue. The Messiah of Scripture told his Talmudim disciples to make other Talmudim, other disciples, through showing love and compassion. And that's going to bring about, if we show love and compassion, it's going to bring about conversion. That's the only way you're going to bring about a conversion experience, is through the use of love and compassion. And that brings about a conversion of the heart. So he didn't instruct his followers to beat people into submission. And that's what the right, or the Christian right, thinks that they can do by use of the ballot. They think that they can cause other people to submit to their will. And that's not how freedom works. You're always going to have pushback. You're always going to have people rebelling against you when you try and legislate morality. Voting, as I stated, is immoral. It is the use of a passive force to make others comply to your will. Voting is antithetical to the true concept and philosophy of freedom. You can't have one side, say 51%, try and make the other side, 49%, comply to their will through that passive force of voting. If you believe in freedom, you're not going to try and force someone else to do what you want them to do. You're not going to be able to force them to do what you want to do and still say that you believe in freedom. Because if you vote, you don't believe in freedom. You know, I don't want to hear people who go to the ballot box say that they believe in freedom. That's a lie. You don't believe in freedom. You believe in using passive force to get other people to comply with your will. So, you know, and a person can't expect others to respect their freedom if they refuse and are not willing to respect the freedom of another person. So if you expect other people to respect your freedom, then you better respect their freedom, or else you don't believe in freedom at all. Um, Freedom cannot, you cannot have, you can't have it both ways. You can't expect someone to um, allow you to behave in a certain manner as long as you're not posing any harm to anyone else. But you can't expect others to allow you to behave the way you want to behave if you're not willing to let others behave the way they want to behave, as long as they're not harming someone else's life or belongings. Um, and another thing is, too, people are going to be held accountable for their vote. If you go along with the crowd and live within the system, the blood of every innocent victim of drone strikes and bombings is going to be on your hands. Um, if you're part of this system, it doesn't matter because the election's a scam anyway. Your vote doesn't matter. But if you're taking part of this system and you're voting for one person, stating that you agree with them, you're giving your stamp of approval to that candidate, and they win, every innocent person that dies, and you know, no one can argue with this. You might not agree with it due to cognitive dissonance, due to the fact that you can't think critically, you don't possess that ability at all. But if you support a candidate, that means you also will be held accountable for every life, every innocent life which is taken under the policies of that candidate. You can't just show up and cast your vote in November and then for the next 2 to 4 years live as if you have no responsibility for the consequences of your vote. You can't do it. You can't live as if, go 2 to 4 years and live like uh, you're not responsible for the consequences of your vote. Voting reduces everything to us versus them. And the only us versus them that needs to exist is the people, individuals, not citizens, but the people versus those who want to keep everyone in slavery. That's the only us versus them that should exist. However, voting reduces everything to us versus them, that left right paradigm, where elections amount to nothing more than a contest, no different than a public sporting event. That's what it is. You see people with signs, with shirts, with bumper stickers, Trump 2020, Sanders 2020, and then when their candidate loses, they go into a month-long depression, or if their candidate wins, they spend 4 years on a high thinking that they've won some type of contest. Um, Really, it's just the elections, they amount to nothing more than a contest, and it's really sad that it's come to this. um Freedom for all, as long as someone is not harming others, their freedom, as long as another person is not harming someone else, their freedom should not offend or anger anyone else. If you have a neighbor and they get high all the time and they stumble through their front yard, and as long as they're not doing any damage to you or your property, you have no reason to be angry, unless of course they will not tell you who their dealer is. Then I'd be pissed. um no, seriously. The only thing that I would use CBD or THC for is medicinal purposes only. Um, so, um, we need to live according to the rule that no one has a higher claim to another person's life or belongings than that person. And then turn that around, that of course no one has a higher claim to your life or belongings than you do. Um, Years of trying to legislate morality, I think, has finally come back to bite the corporate Christian structure in the ass. People are always going to rebel and push back against laws which are designed to control behavior. Prohibition, for one. Uh, After Prohibition was enacted, the largest underground liquor store was created. I mean, you had liquor being sold more so than when it was legal. And we're going to get into it in a couple weeks here, but Prohibition was not about really behavior. They used behavior, and they, of course, put it out there. We need to save the family. Um, but Prohibition was put there, put in place because they didn't want farmers being able to manufacture their own fuel. They wanted to control the fuel market because Henry Ford had created a vehicle that ran on ethanol, grain alcohol. Um, anyway, so in the years of trying to legislate morality has come back to bite Christianity in the ass. And, you know, a lot of people will take the stance that this is a Christian or Judeo Christian country. We were founded on Christian principles. Uh, well, if you think that the Puritans were good people, then you need to do a little study. You need to research history because the Puritans were the most vile, disgusting murderers that ever stepped foot on this continent. The only people uh, in the beginning of the formation or colonization of the American continent who could say they truly lived according to Scripture were the Quakers. And they believed in freedom. They believed that everyone should be able to do as they wanted to do without anyone watching over them. As long as when you were doing whatever you wanted to do, you were not posing any kind of threat or well, harm to anyone or anyone's belongings, property, if you want to call it property. Um, So the Puritans, which a lot of people they'll say, well, yes, we were found. I mean, the Pilgrims, they were Christians, and they came over and they had dinner with the Indians, and then one of the Indians farted at the table, and then they killed them all. So anyway, and actually, the Indians didn't do anything that offensive. Um, they tried to help these people. The Puritans are evil bastards. There is not one Puritan who was a member of the kingdom. If you believe so, you need to go back and read your history. The Puritans began the slaughter of the indigenous tribes of America. Over 100 million existed at one time, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and they were wiped out by English Puritans who thought we're doing God's work. Anyway, uh, these people, if you want to hang your hat on America being a Christian nation because of the Puritans, you're foolish. Anyway, we'll leave that there for now. But both left and right seek to control. The left forcing those who work to support those who don't want to work or don't work, and they feed the military-industrial complex. And then, of course, the right, they want to control everyone by erecting a police state and also by feeding the military-industrial complex. So everyone needs to disconnect from the tyrannical system which lives off of the blood of innocents. The American government goes into other countries, they invade other countries so they can control the natural resources of that country. And they don't care who they kill in the process. Your vote is your stamp of approval. And if you can't see that, then you cannot think critically. You Trump supporters out there, the man has launched thousands of drone strikes, thousands. We're talking more than 5,000 since he's been puppet. And of course, those drone strikes continue no matter if it's a Democrat or Republican in office. But you people who voted for him, this foreign policy of killing innocent people to control the natural resources of another country continues. So why would you continue to go along with a system that does that? And many of the people who are being killed are believers in the Creator. They might not believe exactly like you do. And hopefully, if you're just a corporate Christian, Baptist, Catholic, evangelical, Pentecostal, whatever, hopefully they don't, or hopefully they didn't. But there's a lot of people out there that are being killed so the United States government can take over the uh, natural resources of a country. Look what's going on in Africa. Africa is the continent that has the uh, richest supply of natural resources. Look it up if you don't believe me. Um, and all of these nations, China right now is fighting with America and Europe to get control of the natural resources in Africa. Look it up. It's real easy. All you gotta do is Google it. Continent with the most natural resources comes up Africa. Continent being fought over for natural resources. Number one continent being fought over for natural resources, Africa. Um, so anyway, we need to start now so future generations can experience true freedom. We need to disconnect from that beast known as government, because all government does is lie, kill, steal, and destroy. That's all they exist to do. The government cannot bring forth prosperity. Government cannot bring forth peace. You had the most prosperous, peaceful society in an area of Belgium known as Antwerp of Flanders for 100 years before the British Crown wanted to take over because of all the prosperity which was taking place there. So it can work. It does work. Freedom works, people. Freedom works. Um, so anyway, your grandchildren, your children will love true freedom. You know, red, brown, yellow, black, and white. Freedom will be precious in their sight. So let freedom ring. Let that be your stance this coming election. Disconnect yourself from lying, killing, stealing, and destroying. There's not one of you out there, if you try and think critically, that can say that government does more good than it does evil. Government doesn't do any good at all. The only good that they do is used to keep you sucking on their tit. So, grow up, disconnect, and let's take forth the message of freedom this next election cycle. There doesn't need to be, someone asked me, are you extreme right wing? Some people actually ask me if I'm left wing because I don't believe in borders. I don't believe in imaginary lines across the earth. Um, I don't believe in war. So that, oh, you must be a left wing. Uh, you know, but I do believe that everybody should be able to own whatever weaponry. I do believe that life in the womb needs to be protected. I believe in no taxation. So, you really freedom. If you're just one wing or the other, you can't fly. So there's two wings that freedom has to fly, but it's a completely different bird than the government bird. So anyway, we're going to go into. I did want to read this though, real quick before I'm going to end on this note. You're probably all thinking, "Damn, I hope he ends." Um, and soon I've got to go to the bathroom. A man is none the less a slave because he is allowed to choose a new master once in a term of years. Neither are a people any less slaves because permitted periodically to choose new masters. What makes them slaves is the fact that they now are, and are always hereafter to be, in the hands of men whose power over them is, and always is to be, absolute and irresponsible. I love this book. If you do not have it, you need it, because this book alone will teach you how to start thinking critically. Lysander Spooner, No Treason. This man was an attorney. He was also a Northern abolitionist. A Northern abolitionist who goes on record stating that the war was not fought over slavery, that the Union's purpose in the war was not to free slaves, that the Union's purpose of the war was to secure their power, was to make sure they still had power and also make sure they still had funds coming in to support the government, because the South was a cash cow. So anyway, a lot of you out there talking about, oh, the lost cause. Well, none of you assholes lived at the time this man did. And he's a Northern abolitionist, and he will tell you that the war between the states, Lincoln's War of Aggression, the War of Northern Aggression, was not fought over slavery. Slavery had nothing to do with it. It was an economic war. The Southern states seceded due to the Corwin Amendment and the Morrill Tariff. Nothing to do with slavery. Lincoln himself, if I could preserve the Union without freeing one slave, I would do so. Anyway, Lysander Spooner, No Treason. As he says in here, really quick again, a man is none the less a slave because he is allowed to choose a new master once in a term of years. So if you want absolute and irresponsible power over you, continue to vote. However, I hope that you all choose freedom. This is William Moore, Beyond the Ties that Bind. Till next time, have a wonderful day.